Okay. Anyway, okay. Well, while they're doing that, I can start my talk. So I'll be talking about these mounts that John Broughton built. So I did give a presentation about them at the last meeting, and I'll just do a quick recap and then tell about the new thing. Next slide. And I put, Joan and John as co-authors on this because it's really John's work. Um, this is um, this is the old version of it. The large hinge, fits over a 12 inch paving stones. You can get them in Australia, and you get them here. In Australia, they're 303 millimeters usually, but they often call them 12 inch. The mounts. So he built 6 of them for the 6 middies that I had there. The mounts are sturdier than any tripod I've ever used, and they can easily point to very high altitudes. Um, the anyway, and the mounts are not alt azimuth. They're actually alt mounts because they point in altitude but in orthogonal directions. I mean, this is the true altitude here, and then but the other direction is you move this bar left and right, and that essentially, if you were pointing in the zenith, it would go in altitude east or west, while the other was going north south or whatever. So, um, but but anyway, it's quite simple to operate, but you have to always move it to near the altitude you want to observe at beforehand because it takes a while to turn these screws in the old design. So I use a protractor to preset the thing to the altitude of the event. Um, anyway, and the laser pointer can be held against the rail here, so you can easily see where you're looking in the sky. Um, uh, so next slide. Um, this just shows, I mentioned that actually the first use of these paver mounts and actually used for pre-pointing the night before was for that grazing occultation on June 22nd. We had another, a month later, we had this occultation of a 10th magnitude star by the asteroid Bertolda. Um, and, the idea is you put the, set up everything, put the paving stone out, and then put the scope on the paving stone and pre-point it, get it pointed at in the right altitude and azimuth using the stars charts as we often do. But then afterwards, you carefully lift the telescope off the paving stone, and then just the paving stone sits out there all the next day. And assume as long as you have it in a place where people won't kick it or something, yeah, it's not too likely that someone will steal a paving stone. They cost about less than $1 or about $1. You can get them from Home Depot, and just put it away from the road enough that and so then you can come back the next day or the next night, I mean, and carefully place the telescope back on. Um, but you have to be careful and tighten everything down, so that the telescope, orientation doesn't change. And we hadn't tightened down things close, tight enough. We discovered on this one trip where we set up several stations. We only had 2 hours of dark time for this event for the night before, but we wanted to try to cover this path in the uncertainty zone, and the prediction turned out to be a little bit larger than 1 sigma. So next slide. Now this just shows the stations we tried to deploy, and this is Richard Williamson tried to observe, observed from his home south of Alice Springs. and he had no occultation. But this show we set up these 4 paver mounts and pre-pointed them the night before in the paving stones, and then took the telescopes back and set them up, and then we ran 2 more stations in that 2 hours we were able to set up. We had some problems, and at one of finally at the attended station, the telescope actually fell apart. It wasn't the paver mount or anything; it was the telescope, tube or something. There was some stupid thing, and we didn't recover. But this one worked, that we had just set up and pre-pointed just an hour before, so no occultation occurred. Steve Kerr was on this line here. He was in Rockhampton on the in Queensland coast, and he had no occultation. He was rather miffed about that, because he was so close to the center line. Why didn't I get an event? And so it really depended upon these guys here. But at this station here, we found out when we came back to it that an animal had attacked the equipment. That was the dingo or whatever it was that in the and so there was no recording there. Apparently the animal had attacked it during the afternoon before the occultation. I mean, we had all these going. We had these set up. We had to put camcorders on them during the afternoon. And so they were there. I was careful in setting these locations up to really get them off the road and the bush, where no one would likely see them even in the daytime. Um, but and no people did. But this dingo over there, yes.
There's a couple things. I assume you have to mark the telescope and the paver mount so the right scope goes back onto the right paver.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. You know. Yeah. You have to be sure that the right telescope goes on the right paver mount, and that's very definitely true. So because the paver mount will be each one will be at a slightly different angle, however you plop it down on the ground, and then you adjust the paver mount to the right position to get it to the right pointing. But each telescope is different in its relation to the paver stone. Yes.
The other question was, what about the sun passing over the scope?
Okay, you do have to calculate that just to make sure that the sun is not in the field of view. That this won't work if you don't want to have that situation. Bob?
What's the field of view with that camera and that scope?
With the 80 millimeter, with the focal reducing lens and everything, it's about 2 degrees on. He was asking about the field of view size with the MIDI systems that we're using for these, the 80 millimeter, and the field of view is a little less than 2 degrees across, and it's about 1 degree high, a little bit more than 1 degree high. And so that's the kind of accuracy you have to get. And we're doing this now with the Maxis, and they're a little smaller field of view. So we haven't actually got a good test with the Maxis yet. We were only doing it with the Midis while we were in Australia, but with the new mounts now we have them for the 120 millimeter scopes too. Anyway, then. But we found out, the next station down was mispointed, so it didn't catch the right thing. And this one too, the star just crossed the field of view, but it was early, and it crossed just a corner, and so those 2 scopes, when we transported it back to home and then put them back up in the transport, they got jostled. We didn't really carefully put them in the car, and the screws weren't tightened down enough or something. So they got put, and so we learned a lesson that you really have to be careful. Place them flat on the base. They were sort of jumbled together for a while, and but this one here, it was pre-pointed correctly, and it recorded the occultation. So it was the first success of that we did with the previous night pre-point. John Broughton has had some other successes himself, including one where he, there was a 6 magnitude star or something. He did this trick 21 days in advance, and it worked. Of course, he had something like an 8 degree field of view or something, but Anyway, so if we can go to the next slide. There was one other event in Australia we tried to do, but it turned out we had huge cloud problems, and so we tried the pre-pointing with it. And one pre-pointed system actually did record the star going through the field of view, but the path shifted away from it. But anyway, this is the predicted center line here, and this is for this Bertholda event, and this is Steve Kerr's miss-observation. And this is our positive, and Richard Williamson had the miss here, and we had the other miss up here that we recorded. So you can see, at least we know where the shadow went, for this event. We know that it didn't go down here, that it most likely was up here. So I mean, there's a small chance it could have fit down here, but that's a tighter thing than that. So it was a lot of work with little gain, but at least with one positive we knew about where it went. And it showed what we needed to do for the next time. But so far we really haven't had a good next time. Next. This just shows shows one of the placements of the paver mount before. As you see the type of country, you see the road in the background here, but there are a lot of bushes to hide things. People really can't see the scope from the road. Next slide. Okay, this is this new paver mount design that John Broughton built the end of February and early March when we were staying in the Brisbane area, and so this just shows all the pieces of this. So. And Joan took this series of pictures just to show the assembly of it. Next slide. Is showing putting the feet together on this one crossbar that's screwed in, and then another foot is, the longer foot goes on the front end there. And then next we attach the, next slide. It shows attaching the telescope rail and then the metal bar that you screw down to hold it in place once you get it pointed. But you loosen it a little bit and you can move this left and right to the bottom thing here.
Wing nuts.
Yeah, everything's wing nuts. So you can, it's all operated by hand. And let's see. See, you can slide it easily that way. You can even just push the whole paver stone, or the feet if you're, we often use these without paver stones if you're just doing it same night as we often do, and then you don't need the paver stone really. So and it works fine that way too. Yeah, it has a bar in the back here with these little tabs, and so this bar fits, and then you don't have the feet. You keep the feet off. Yeah, you don't attach the feet if you're using the paver stone, and then it will rest solidly in the right position on the paver stone. So um, anyway, next slide. Okay, this just shows the final attachment, and then you attach the altitude rail here, and it has this thumb screw here that you can adjust the altitude to two different heights. And you've got this one problem here is that the telescope needs to be rotated a little bit, so this rail is interfering with the finder scope. But the finder scope, you take the finder scope off after you've done the pre-pointing, so you only need one finder scope, and you can use it for every telescope. Um, and the one beautiful thing when we were using the tripods and you take the finder scope off, the damn telescope would always fall about a field of view or half a field of view or something, and you'd have to pre-point and make sure you're back on the right pre-point line after you remove the finder. But with these, it just stays rock solid. You're always within better than a tenth of a field when you take the finder scope off. Um, and, uh, and the idea is you loosen, this screw is loosened and this is tightened. Once you, and then when you make small adjustments, you just turn this screw here. There's a long screw here, and you can see this thing moves on this rail here and changes the altitude by small amounts. So you have the fine adjustment in altitude. You make the coarse adjustment here, but then you also want to have the fine adjustment. And so that's the way it works.
Is there a fine adjustment azimuth also?
No, but it's very smooth. It's very simple to move it very in an azimuth by small amounts. And I often just do this, and it works fine.
So you make an old telescope and a mount overnight?
No. Once you get it set up on the, if you're doing it on the same night, yeah, of course you do that like you always do. But if it's previous night pre-pointing,
Use your hands there. I'll hold
the previous night pre-pointing, then once you've got it pre-pointed, then you tighten everything down. You might even tighten this guy. You might double check and make sure you're on the field and everything. But tighten it really tight, and then carefully lift it off the paver stone and put it in your car. And lie it flat and maybe prop it with some towels or something so that it doesn't bang roughly against something and knock these screws, the things loose or something like that. And we did tests where we actually set up in the backyard in Alice Springs. We set them up, and then we made a 50-mile drive, with them, and then put them back on, and it always worked when we had everything tightened down right.
The legs allow you to use it without the paver if you're not doing pre-pointing the night before. And we just put them on. That's the way we were using it the other night.
What people are not seeing is that little L-shaped metal bracket that tucks up against the back edge of the
Yeah. See, it's this thing here and here.
You have that with you? Just the metal bracket?
No. It's just this.
We painted them black
Yeah.
after we put
I
it
see.
together so that it wouldn't show up in the dark.
Yeah.
Right, so the paver mount, this surface here, this front surface,
Mm-hmm.
pushes against the back edge of the paver mount, and that's your alignment surface?
Yes.
Take the whole thing, once you got it set up, put it back in your car and go off it.
Exactly.
And then
Mhm.
you come back a day later,
Mhm.
put it back on the ground. Now, what about the surface?
On the stone.
You put it on the paver stone.
The paver stone stays
You didn't
overnight.
have a stone with you, I was kind of confused.
Right. No, you leave the paver stone. Right. Yeah.
I guess I didn't carry a table with you.
It's a 12 by 12 inch, 2-inch thick piece of concrete.
That you there in Australia, right?
Yeah. You can get them here. Everywhere. Yeah.
Is there an outline on the stone, so when you set it back down, you're
Yeah, we draw a couple of lines on the stone to indicate the direction it should point, or especially when we had the wooden ones, they had a triangular pattern, and so it would fit, the triangle would fit. If this doesn't have the triangle, so you could make the lines where these bar is, though, at the other end of the stone. But it doesn't matter left and right where it is, as long as you're up against the back of the stone snugly. Bob Sandy.
I'm going to play the devil's advocate. You take Advil or you're setting these up.
Yes, if I took
Your
Advil.
back hurt when you're done.
I haven't had any back problems yet, thankfully. So, right. Yeah.
View on the video is how large?
It's with the MIDI system. It's about not quite 2 degrees wide and a little more than 1 degree.
Tolerance of about a degree each way.
Yeah. No, I mean the tolerance has to be better than that. It has to be half a degree or better to be repointed with these properly. This is close to the end. Yeah, yeah. Let's go through. There aren't very many more. There's, I think, just a couple. Um, because we got these in early March, and this shows us actually testing it out, Joan testing it out. In the daytime, we were preparing for, because we are actually going to use these because they are lighter than the other mounts we had, so we were going to use them for the eclipse in Indonesia. And the next slide shows, which I think is the last one, shows them actually using, so this was the first use of the new paver mounts. And we used paver mounts for all 4 telescopes that we ran for the eclipse, and they worked fine for that purpose. Um, of course, there wasn't any pre-pointing or anything like that. We were just doing everything real time, with that. And with the slow motion here, we were able to follow the sun and so forth. Um, yeah, but that's another story. But we've used the paver mounts for we used them also for the Cleopatra occultation in April when we came back home, and we used both the new and the old style ones, and including we also had some maxi paver mounts that we used, and that worked fine. In fact, one of the maxi paver mounts, I forgot to strap these things down, but we came back, it worked fine. It didn't, the telescope didn't move because it was sitting so well in the mount just from its weight. So I think that's the end of the talk. If there are any other questions, Bob?
How high an altitude?
Oh, there's one more, yeah.
How high an altitude will that go?
It will go to the zenith. Yeah. So, I mean, you might have to, if you put it in the zenith, you might want to put a rock or something here because it starts to become unstable at the highest altitudes. Um, but that's it's much better than any tripod that we've out has tripods. Just become terribly unstable after certain points. Okay, yeah. Um, Anyway, so we've had no good opportunities since March. So we said we brought 3 of the new style paver mounts for maxis and 4 for minis, as well as 2 old style mounts for the minis at home with us from Australia. And we really want to get someone here in the U.S. to build these. They're pretty simple things. Anyone with a good machine shop can make these. We showed them to Dave Galt and to Richard Williamson, and they said, yeah, oh yeah, we could easily make these things if we wanted to, but they weren't into pre-pointing in as much as we are.
Any idea what I was going to ask you if they're for sale.
Right.
The answer's not.
Right. No, John Broughton is the only one who's ever built them, and he didn't charge us a cent for them. He says as long as you use them and tell him who did it, he's fine with that. If he starts, if there's enough interest, maybe he would make a few more, for other people and ship them here. But we'd really be better to get someone in the U.S. to do this, and so I'm sort of making an appeal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, there was a promising early evening event in North Carolina at the end of April that we were going to try these on, but of course the weather was bad, so we didn't do that. But the next attempt we're actually going to try to use the paver mounts is for these bright asteroid occultations in late August, early September, which I'll be talking, I guess, next anyway. And especially there's the one before midnight on the 27th of August involving 85 EO. For that we can pre-point some stations during the night, certainly, but we just want to get some more stations, and so that's why I want to pre-point to So that instead of running only 4 stations that we might be able to get out normally, maybe we can run 8. So.
I was wanting to say a few sentences more about this. What this is sitting next to the equipment, I'll be talking more about this tomorrow, but what we're planning to start to use more of, this is a Windows 10 computer, the iView. I have another one, it's a Kangaroo, and part of the Windows 10, here's the end frame of the video I took with it. This not on the 80 millimeter, this was using a Mighty Mini, but
Yeah, we use this for the Grays.
for the Grays the other night, and so.
What video camera?
Oh, we were just using
Oh, these things.
Yeah, the PC one.
This is a replacement for the camcorder.
Yeah. Yeah, this is, yeah.
See,
According to virtual mode.
I use Mighty Mini.
This is recording to the new software that Russ has written.
Oh.
Wow.
So I use my regular.
What? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
But I had them set on maximum angle gain.
Yes.
All just blacked
I have a
out.
question, Joe. What are these 2 little pins down here
They're just to help the setting.
underneath?
They're just they rest on top of the stone.
They rest on the stone.
Yes, it's just to get it to rest properly.
The automatic gain.
Rather than having this broad surface rest on the stone, it's more of a plane.
Yes,
So there's no worry about that digging into the stone and possibly,
depends on the quality of the stone.
so you put it down.
Yeah, right. I mean,
These are not adjustable then, they're just rivets of some kind?
they're not adjustable.
Yeah, one test we did, for this Galileo occultation that we were going to try to observe, you know, it looked like the weather was going to be bad, you know, close to Alice Springs. It was down at you know, in actually South Australia, about 200 kilometers south. But we were thinking of getting on an airplane and flying up to Port Hedland in Western Australia. If we did that, we couldn't take a paver stone, and it turned out that particular event was at a holiday, so we couldn't buy paver stones locally either. And so we were sort of up a creek, and so we had this idea, though, instead of using paver stones, to use corkboard. And so we hammered corkboard, this about half-inch thick corkboard, and I think a couple of pieces together, I forget. Well, we just had, you know, and then just hammered it into the ground with long nails, and seeing if we could pre-point with those. And that worked. It was not as stable as with a stone, but you know, where it was with a stone, we got within 1/10 of a field of view every time. With the corkboard, we got within 1/4 of a field of view, and so that's so we could have taken the corkboard on the plane, but we decided the weather was going to be okay. We saw the later forecast, and it looked like the clouds were diminishing in the area we wanted to observe in South Australia. Says, okay, let's cancel these expensive plane trips. That would have been a big nuisance anyway. And then it turned out the forecast clouds increased, and we had too much cloud interference to get successful observations.
We're in Missouri.
I'll show you in the next slide. Let's move on to the next another talk. I'll show exactly. Next slide. Is there any? This should be the end. Yeah. So
We were hoping to have Steve talk on using star catalog comparisons and thoughts on Gaia.
You want to do that now?
Yeah.